Welcome to the Alexandra Wenman Show. I am here with my very good friend and soul sister Lorraine Flaherty, and Lorraine is an amazing transformational therapist. She's got a lot of tools in her toolkit, and one of her specialities being past lives, future lives, and life between lives. So we're going to talk a little bit to Lorraine today. Welcome, Laurie. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thank you for joining me. I just want to give our viewers a little bit of your background. Can you tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey and how you came to be doing what you do today? Because it's quite extraordinary.
Well, like most people's stories, it goes way back to the earliest years of being a seeker of knowledge, right from the very beginning. Irish Catholic background, and really recognising that there were so many discrepancies in the things that I was being taught, and so many things that didn't make sense. So really been looking for the truth of who we are and why we're here right from the beginning. And I was always aware of there being more to us than people talked about. And I was aware of spirits, and I was very aware of I think, my own past lives from an early age. But as I'm sure you and many people have found, that a lot of my ideas got put down to being vivid imagination. But even though I was kind of still exploring fairly traditional life, so I ended up becoming a hair and makeup artist in the early years, and it was really important to me to work with people, and I loved hearing people's stories, and that was
hair and makeup artists are like counsellors anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I knew more about most people's lives than their friends did, because it was safe to talk about it. And I really liked this idea of finding out more about who people were and helping them to see things from a different perspective. And I recognised that I was helping people change how they felt by how they looked. But there was still this sense, a search for something a bit deeper, something that could really help people to transform their lives. And so all the while that I was doing this fairly traditional role, I constantly had my head in books, and I was doing lots of courses, and my nickname as I was growing up was usually Weirdo, because I was always exploring something that was a bit out of the box, and whether it was magic or whether it was sort of esoteric knowledge, and whether it was really early religions as well, which didn't really fit with my hairdressing background. So I was seen as being a little odd. But it was just this knowing that there was something that I was meant to be doing. I felt like there was this absolute calling. And spiritual circles, meditations, I kept feeling like I was getting close to what that thing was.
And how did you dive in? What was the thing, the kind of catalyst that made you kind of go, I need to be, instead of kind of searching for these answers, what made you make the jump into helping people find their own answers?
Well, over the years, I had a few fairly close brushes with kind of my own mortality, really. So there were a few near-death experiences in different ways, and a few quite transcending experiences in meditation, sometimes accidental, so where I would find myself floating out of my body and becoming aware of a sense of kind of infinite nature and being one with everything. And really connecting with beings that were kind of more than we were. And
can you share one of those incidents with us? Can you give us any details?
Sure, yeah. I mean, one of them was when I was part of a spiritual circle, and every week I would go and religiously try to go into a state of meditation and to connect with our higher power or the world beyond. And week after week of practice of really trying hard to meditate and get to that space, it never happened. And then one week I was just exhausted. It'd been a really busy week, and I remember arriving at the class and thinking, I'm just going to give myself a break, I'm just going to rest. And so when we sat down, and the person leading the group asked us to just take some deep breaths and just to let go, I suddenly had this extraordinary sense of kind of shooting out of my body, and I was aware of my hands resting on my lap, and it almost felt like I'd stretched, like I was elastic, and I'd shot up through the heavens. And it was a little bit like being on the Star Trek Voyager. I could see stars and things shooting past me. And then I suddenly stopped in this place that was absolute pure nothingness, but everythingness, pure peace, pure bliss. And there was an awareness of still my form and this connection, this sort of light connection to this body that was still on the earth plane. But I had an absolute sense of this infinite nature, this infinite experience, and it was probably the closest I think you could get to knowing God, because I felt like I was God. I felt like I was everything and yet nothing at the same time, and there were no worries, there were no real thoughts. It was absolutely beautiful, and I remember thinking that I would be quite happy to stay there because it was so incredible. And then somewhere in down on the earth plane, I remember having a sense of the person running the class saying it's time to come back.
No.
And no, and then it was like somebody snapped a rubber band, and suddenly I was back in my body, and then that also the excitement of achieving that, it again led me to try and get back to that place, because I knew it was the true essence. It felt like the true essence of who I really was. So everything that was going on the earth plane, it had a different kind of take to it, really, because I knew there was more. And so it really led me to question, how can I get there, and not only how can I get there, but how can I share with other people this beauty, this awareness, because it made everything that we experienced in our daily lives seem not mundane, but a bit more trivial. This higher perspective changed things for me, and eventually, when I kept searching and kept looking, I eventually came to work with hypnosis, and it was a real revelation for me. It was like one of those kind of angel epiphany moments, because I realised that hypnosis was a tool that I could use to actually open up the subconscious, the information stored in the subconscious that could actually get you to that place. And I've learned how to travel to that place now using the state of trance, using the state of hypnosis.
So how did you first come across hypnosis? How did it come into your kind of sphere of influence, I suppose? Were you searching for it for a long time, for the thing that was the thing?
Absolutely. I had been exploring meditation, which I knew was a really valuable tool, and I knew that through all the different religions and traditions, secret societies, esoteric societies, they'd all talked about accessing this state of inner awareness. And so I long believed that the answers to who we were was stored inside of us, but just wasn't sure how you got access to it, how you could find it. And I think I'd gone from meditation, all different forms of it, to guided visualizations, which again came close. And it was almost accidental. I think I was first hypnotised at a Mind Body Spirit show when somebody grabbed me to do some work, and I was actually amazed at how easy it was to access that state. And even at that point, I don't think I'd realised that was my tool. So I asked the universe for a sign when I was desperate to know what I was meant to be doing. And I'm sure you've experienced this, where signposts turn up and they're so obvious. And for a period of about 6 weeks, everything that I picked up, everything I read about, every person I spoke to was talking about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnosis. And so I went online to see if I could find some information, and there was a 7-day course coming up, and it was on day 2 of the course that we did hypnosis. And for me, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. And the first time that I worked on somebody on that course, put her in hypnosis and asked her to go back and think of an event that may have caused a particular issue or a problem that she was having, and she went straight there and she relived it. And in the telling of the story, she cried, she released some emotions that were attached to it, but she came back with this absolute awareness of, wow, that's why I've had a fear about this particular thing, and it was because I was a child and I don't need to have it anymore. And it just made complete sense to me that this was how you could help people to heal.
So it was in the moment went click, the minute you put someone in that state rather than you being put in that state.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I'd experienced it myself with various people and had got information, but hadn't actually realised that it was the tool that I was supposed to use to help others. And I knew at that moment that that was exactly my path.
Wowzers. And so can you explain a little bit just to our viewers how you work? I mean, obviously I'm really familiar with how you work and I think it's amazing. Just what could people expect coming for a session with you and the tools in your toolkit and where you might take them, what they might experience for themselves?
Yeah, so because I teach clinical hypnosis, as you know, to medical students, and still to this day, many people, because of the stage hypnosis and because of the impressions that people have about it, people are still a little bit afraid. And I'm really clear that hypnosis is just a focused state of attention. There's nothing otherworldly, there's nothing mystical. I wish there was, but there really isn't. It's very grounded. And it's just a means by which people can go in and access data that's stored at the back of their mind. I often think of myself as being a bit like a computer programmer. So it's as though we're looking for the glitches in the programs, we're looking for the files that have been corrupted, that aren't serving people in the right way. And by asking the right questions, when somebody's in that very focused state, they're able to go in and then unlock the data. So I guide people into a really safe place and into a really comfortable state of just focused attention, and then they will go back and recall the events that have led to particular issues, and whether that's from their current life childhood, whether it's information that's been passed down through their ancestors and has been embedded effectively in their DNA, or whether it's other lifetimes, they're able to go in and actually relive these experiences and to connect with these parts of themselves that have been holding fears, holding limitations, holding beliefs that hold them back. And by understanding where they came from, we can help to unravel it. And particularly if there's any unfinished business, we know that at the moment there's a lot of balancing going on the planet. There's a lot of karma that is coming back, that is really demanding attention, demanding that it be resolved. And so this is an incredible way of people getting in and healing, finding means by which they can genuinely and really authentically find forgiveness and let go of some of the things that have been holding them back. And for me, the only way we can truly forgive is to understand why something happened, to understand the source or the origin of it. And in the explorations that I take people on, they start to learn more about not just who they are, but also the people that are in their lives, the people that are in their world. And when we understand why somebody has been, challenging or creating adversity for us, and we realise that on a soul level this was something that we had agreed to, that we had asked for because we wanted to evolve and grow as souls, it's hugely empowering, because people step out of being a victim and they step back into being the sort of the writer, the director of their own story, their own script. And there's a huge sense of freedom, which is, as you know, what my work is all about. So, I've kind of packaged what I do as being called inner freedom therapy, so that it's about people releasing what's keeping them stuck.
Yeah, very effective. And I just want to, can you share with the people watching some of the extraordinary experiences people have had with past lives? Because, as you might imagine, many people have had past life memory, on this earth plane. And you've had some historical facts come up as well, haven't you, to support it? But there's a broader picture to it as well, isn't there? I'll let you explain.
Yeah, so again, a lot of the times people are convinced that they're making these stories up, that the information that they're getting may be something that they've read in a book or that they've seen it on TV, because we have so much data and so much information nowadays at our fingertips. But the lifetimes that my clients go into, I've had no Napoleons, there have been no Cleopatras, there hasn't been anybody particularly famous. But what has happened is that they've often tapped into lifetimes of people that did make a difference. So when we've gone and researched on the internet, we have been able to find data about these people. And it's just incredible how accurate the information is. In fact, in 17 years of officially doing this work now, I've never once had somebody get information in a session that has been discredited after we've done the work.
Wow.
The time periods, the information about what's going on in the world at that time always matches completely, and it's just fascinating the links and parallels that the experiences that they have in those lives have on the current life. So one particular client had come because he was very immersed in his work in this lifetime, and he'd been working as for the fire services, but as a paramedic, and it was when they had to go in and cut people out, so it was quite a sort of specialised area. And he, again, wasn't particularly a believer about past lives, but I think somebody bought this as a gift for him, and he wanted to know, why was he so passionate about it, and why was this, it sometimes took over a little bit. And he went back to a lifetime that was in, early, back as far as sort of 700-800, and he found himself as a doctor, as a medic back then at that time, and somebody who was incredibly passionate, was totally obsessed with his work. And he'd specialised in working with working with brains and releasing pressure, boring holes into brains to alleviate problems, and had had this obsession with sterilising, with washing his hands and boiling everything that he worked with. And everybody else thought this was ridiculous. They saw no purpose to this. And he wrote reams and reams of books on his studies and studying bodies when they'd passed. And he died feeling as though he hadn't finished, that he hadn't completed his work. And there was a great frustration that he had at the end of his life, at needing to know more. And when I asked if he could tell me names or any information, he said, "Oh, my name's Paul." And that just seemed so wrong to him for that period. And then he said, and the name's Agrippa or Agamemnon, but it's not that, but it's something like that. And later on, a few days after the session, he came back to me and he was completely blown away, because he had found that there had been somebody called Paul of Aegeus who had been around at that exact period of time, and he had written copious works, all based on his studies in the medical field and the specialist area of the brain releases and he was one of the first people that was aware of germs and actually keeping everything clean, and so data like that, it can't really come from,
you can't make up that level of detail,
so he was blown away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And just for our viewers, have you had, I mean, I know you have, but just for, if you could talk about this, have you had people experience lifetimes not of this planet?
Yes.
For the sci-fi buffs out there and the starseeds.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more common, I think, as we're evolving, as we're developing as a species, and people are becoming more aware of these other aspects. The first time I had a client who went through a very mundane life, which is unusual for nothing to happen, until he'd been a pilot in the war, and he came back and he got a job as a bus driver, and both of us were thinking, this is a bit dull, until there was suddenly a flash, and then his life ended. And so I got him to slow things down, and we ran back through it, and actually it turned out this was with an abduction. He'd actually been taken up to a spaceship where they had been doing some testing, and when we were in the session, I got him to ask if there was a particular reason why these ETs had taken him, and they said, in another lifetime he was one of us, and so he was then able to jump to the lifetime where he had actually been part of it was a kind of ancestral thing. And so he was a starseed that was here now, that was bringing in, the curiosity of this sort of,
And did that awaken in him information about why he reincarnated onto this earth plane? Did he know his mission?
Yeah, absolutely. And what was really interesting was that he was also shown in the same session that he had a very important lifetime. He had been involved in the building of the pyramids as well, and involved in bringing in specific...
We might have known him.
We may have known him, bringing in specific information about how to use the energy of the pyramids. So he was linked in with the architects, and so he got some information about what the pyramids really are, not that they were a tomb, but how they were used for generating frequencies and energies, and so there was this kind of lineage that he'd had, and of course it was it kind of rocked his world a little bit. It wasn't what he was expecting, but there was so much of it that resonated with him, and thoughts that he'd had and ideas that he'd been having, dreams that he'd been having, then all suddenly started to make sense.
Wowzers. And something that I'd like to share with our viewers is that you can also have shared past life memory, and Lorraine and I are a great example of this. When I started having lots of my memories start to resurface, just like regular memory. I mean, I've had hypnosis, I've had regression with other people and with Lorraine, and she is definitely one of the best I've ever worked with. But in my opening up of my consciousness, I've just had past life memories start to surface. One of the past life memories that I had was as a galactic being, as a being from another realm, another planet. And I could feel myself and see myself as this 8 foot tall, very bubblegum pink looking ethereal being. And I could actually feel my personality as her as well. And around the time my healing system, Precious Wisdom, started coming through, I was in Glastonbury in the UK, and I had a vision. I was meditating. The night before I was given the channeled attunement for Precious Wisdom, I was doing a meditation and I was visited by a galactic guide. And this guide appeared to me very similarly to how I saw myself as this big pink galactic being, also a feminine energy. And this guide sort of came in, and she looked identical to how I looked as this being, only that she was more of a sort of a lemony peachy, a beautiful peach kind of a colour. But it was the most incredible thing I've experienced, because as this energy came in my vision, I looked at her and I knew instantly that this was my twin sister. And I burst into tears in the meditation because I suddenly remembered her, and it was like we'd been reconnected. And the energy, it felt very similar to, I have sisters in this life, so I knew the energy of sister. I knew it wasn't one of my sisters from this lifetime. I knew implicitly that this was a twin sister. I knew her name, and I'm not going to share it on here, but I knew her name, I knew details about her, and all this memory came flooding back. Now, when I was given Precious Wisdom, the healing system, I was channeling a lot of information at the time, and I was told by my guides that I had to take the symbols of Precious Wisdom back to Egypt. And I had all this ancient Egyptian memory flooding in as well from the earth plane. And when I got to Egypt, Lorraine and I had met. We'd met through a friend of ours, Stuart Pearce, through a meditation group, but we hadn't had an opportunity to properly connect and properly meet each other. And when I got to Egypt, I began the work of kind of anchoring the symbols in each of the temples as I was told to do. And I'm going to hand over to Lorraine because she tells this part of the story really well, actually, because we ended up working very synchronistically. So I'll get Laurie to fill you in on this part.
Yeah, so again, I think an important part to mention is that this was December 2012. And so this was a very important time, I think, in the sort of spiritual development of most people, because we were aware that it was the end of a cycle, a huge cycle, the precession of the equinox. So huge changes that were happening. It was the ending of one section of the Mayan calendar, which we know wasn't the end of the world, but it was a shift to another level. And so I was very aware that I had to be somewhere significant at that point. And all information, that I was getting was that I had to be in Egypt. And so, again, synchronistically, Stuart was running this retreat, so I knew I had to be there. And before I went, I had been given a new clearing system. It was like a channeled message, and I've been given this technique that I needed to do that was about clearing stuck energy and blocked energy. Again, it's a huge part of the work that I do. We kind of joke that I'm like the Hoover. And so I arrived in Egypt, and again, Al and I hadn't really spoken to each other properly.
Felt an incredible
we felt a connection.
I need to talk to this woman.
But we arrived on the first night at Karnak Temple. And even though I've been to Egypt many times, it was the first time to do a trip in this part of it. And I'm not an emotional person. I'm not a weeper. So it came as a huge shock to me to walk into the Karnak temple and suddenly find myself in floods of tears. I mean, absolute howling, overflowing tears. I was very grateful for the long hair because I thought the women on the trip or the people on the trip were going to think I was crazy. So I hid under my hair, and I was aware of just this overwhelming sense of anger at the misuse of the space, of the energy, of the distortions of the truth of what these temples really represented. And a little voice in the back of my head, once the tears had subsided, had said, this might be a good place to use this technique that you've just been given. And I thought, oh, okay, well that kind of makes sense. So I stopped and I tuned in, and I went through the process of this clearing. And I felt this energy lift. It felt like very stagnant energy. And as it lifted, I was suddenly aware of this really beautiful light and beautiful loving energy that came in. And I thought, wow! I thought this was a side effect of the work that I'd just done, even though it wasn't a piece that I'd been shown. And so I was very pleased with myself. And it was only the next day when we were sat by the pool, and I was recounting this tale of this strange experience that we'd had. And Al said to me, exactly where in the Karnak temple were you when that happened? And it transpired that we had been in exactly the same place at the same moment when Al was suddenly aware that it was time for her to bring in her piece.
Yeah, I was walking through the Hippostyle Hall, and I'd been told, yes, go and do this attunement, because Precious Wisdom it's a healing, it's an attunement. And it also works as a kind of a geomancy, a healing for the planet, a healing for the earth. It kind of aligns everything back to its divine blueprint. So I'm waiting to do this, for the right moment to do this. I'm like, I've got my tools, I've got my attunement, I'm going to do this thing. And I'm waiting, and I just intuitively was waiting for the right moment. And I'm walking around and I'm going, is it now? And I'm kind of going, not yet, is it now? And suddenly I felt the energy in the space just lift, like a sweeping kind of, and the energy just completely lifted, and I was like, and I suddenly knew, now, do it now. So I did my attunement, and I brought in, and Precious Wisdom is like this, the way I experience it is this incredible golden loving energy, and it's the universal golden ray, and whatever that is, unconditional love, really. And so I brought in the Precious Wisdom and felt it fill the space. And yeah, again, it wasn't until we reconnected and we're having this conversation by the pool the next day that we realised we'd been working in tandem. And this was at the very beginning of a 10-day retreat. So for the next 10 days leading up to the 21st of December 2012, Lorraine and I'm sorry, Stuart, we don't know what your retreat was about. We had our own mission. So we were going into every temple, clearing and realigning through the whole 10 days. And then we got to the 21st of the 12th, the actual day of this end of the Mayan calendar, this alignment of all the planets. And we were doing our thing in the Temple of Luxor. And as we got closer and closer to the Temple of Luxor is built on a human chakra system, so we were processing along towards the heart chakra, and both of the systems we've been given work very much through the heart and through love energy, through unconditional divine connection through the heart. And as we're walking towards the heart chakra,
and can I just say, walking in this procession that felt like we had done it many
times before.
It was a very strange
past
sensation.
Life memory, definitely. And we had many of these past life memories in all the temples, didn't we? And as I was walking, I felt this galactic guide, who was my twin sister, with me, and I could actually see her. And so we get to the heart chakra, and this guide appears before me, this beautiful peachy lemony galactic being, and she says, "Don't worry, my sister," because I'm obviously sobbing my heart out, for no reason, or for a reason that I have no idea. You're just so moved in these energies, and crying my little heart out. And I hear this, "Don't worry, my sister, I'm with you." And she looks at Lorraine, and I have this moment of looking in Laurie's eyes and going, "Oh, it's you!" And it was like, It was like a scene from a film. It was like all worlds just converged. And one thing I noticed was that we have identical colour eyes. And I looked at her and I thought, it's you. And I said, and I'd been telling her about this guide. And I was like, I know it's you. And she burst into tears because she realised, oh my God, I know it's me. I don't know how I know it's me, but I know it's me. And at that moment we embraced. And I looked behind her, and we talk about signs in the physical all the time. And just written in chalk on one of the ancient pillars behind us were the words, I love you, or I heart you, in chalk. And it was this moment of absolute shared past life memory, shared recognition. And a lot of the work we do now in the 3D world, in this world, very much complements. So, we work very similarly. We both work with the Akashic records. We look at the soul record, past lives. We both have energy healing. We both are quite shamanic. We can do a bit of psychic surgery, pull stuff out. We work in different ways, but we very much cover the whole multi-dimensional realm of the spectrum, so to speak. Yeah. But Lorraine, I also want to tell you guys, Lorraine has an amazing book, and I'm gonna get Laurie to talk about her book. So it talks about past lives, but it's much more besides, and it's a phenomenal work, really.
Oh, thank you. And it came about because so many extraordinary stories of the transformations that people had in their lives, and I kept finding myself telling people about them. And so I really wanted to try and get that information to a bigger audience. And so it is very much I'm Irish anyway, so storytelling is in my blood. So it's woven in through the metaphor of the Wizard of Oz as a metaphor for the soul's journey, but it's also just sharing the experiences that people have had and some of my own stories and journeys. And it's called Healing with Past Life Therapy, transformational journeys through time and space. But as you said, it really does cover so much information about who we really are, why we're here, and how we can start to learn more about this multi-dimensional level of self. And there's lots of exercises in there as well, as people start to unravel the story of their life and who they perceive themselves to be, and then expanding those boundaries so that they start to be aware of so many more levels, and then life starts to make sense.
And for people who want to work with Lorraine as well, how can they get in touch with you, Laurie?
So through my website, which is lorraineflaherty.com, or you can go in through innerjourneys.co.uk, and there's plenty of information on there about what can be experienced and what people can explore.
Brilliant. And please check in for any retreats and workshops that Lorraine might be running, talks, and we're going to be doing a few retreats and workshops together, aren't we?
Yes.
So just
called Get Over It.
We call it Get Over It. We don't like to muck about. So, well, thank you so much, my darling, for being with me here today on the Alexandra Wenman Show. I like the sound of that for some reason. Yes, and join me again next time. Thank you so much.